Everyone for joining. This is our Indivisible 1431 candidate check-in for Congressional District 10 and Texas Senate District 5. And so everyone is muted, and I'll have some more information in just a second. So here we go. So we have questions that you may choose from. And because we have congressional candidates and state candidates, we have them divided into two sections. So the federal questions for the congressional candidates are F1, F2, F3, and I think they go to F6. And same for the state, S1, S2, S3, blah, 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 up to S6. So please select two F questions and another two S questions. And then I apologize for the technical difficulties, the story of all our lives, right? But the poll doesn't exactly work the way you'd like to. And it's probably user error on my part. So if you could, and I apologize too, because it's not going to be blind voting, but does it really matter? Just enter your four selections into the chat, and then Kay will diligently transcribe them by making little scratch marks on a pad, and we'll determine what the winners are. Also, please use the chat for comments about the meeting or any of our initiatives. And, we'll put any links and other information out there as well. So tonight's process, each candidate will make a 7-minute statement and they'll speak in ballot order. Before each candidate speaks, I'll just give a very brief introduction so that you'll kind of know who's talking to. Once all four finish, then we'll go to the questions and I'll read the top questions to all candidates so that we're not always in the same order. We're going to rotate the order of a respondent. So, in other words, Dawn Marshall is going to speak first because she's the first one on the congressional ballot. So she'll give the first opening remark. Sorry. Then when it's time for question one, she will rotate to the end and the person who gave opening remarks second, which is Bernie Reyna, will answer the first question, and so on like that. So, having said that, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome our candidates. And I know we have Dawn and Bernie with us. And I apologize. I may have sent out not the best Zoom information, but hopefully they can weather that storm. So if it's okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and say that we'll start. So Dawn Marshall is an archaeologist and a community college professor who volunteers in underfunded schools. So Dawn, we'll put the camera on you. And can you please tell us in 7 minutes or less why you would make a great congresswoman?
Oh my. Every time I have to answer this question, I feel like it's just one of those questions that has so many answers. For me, I think one of the benefits for me is that yes, I am a community college professor, but I am also someone that is, I'm not the richest person in the world. I'm not the most influential. I teach kids, kind of have boots on the ground kind of thing. I think I would make a good congressional candidate because I am one of those people that I do a lot of different things. I have seen a lot of different things. I've had different jobs. I'm from a working class family. I know you say these things, but I mean, honest to gosh, my dad worked at Oscar Myers for 40 years, and he worked on the cut floor and the base and what was the other place he worked? I can't remember now. I think he worked on the dock as well. And he was a union member, and he was also a union steward for a long time. But I think for me, my folks had a high school education and, grew up hard. They grew up during the Depression. And I learned a lot of lessons, from them. But I also learned that the value of education. And I also learned that we need everybody. We don't just need the rich. We don't just need the educated. We don't just need, you know, those folks who think they are better than other people or whatever they think they are. I think we need all walks of life. And I think for me, I would bring a different flavor to the Congress. I think Bernie actually looked this one up. He said when he looked it up, there's about 2% of the Congress that are actually working class, and the rest are all from the elite groups. And I think for me, being an anthropologist, having to grow up in a way that, wasn't the easiest, didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth, had to work for everything I had for the most part. My folks were very much, suck it up, buttercup kind of thing. It's from that era when, they basically treated you like a plant. They put you in a corner, they watered you every once in a while, and they said, go away, go be free, go outside. And so for me, I think that given the fact that I've had to educate myself, I've had to work hard. I do have that Protestant work ethic kind of thing going on. I'm from the upper Midwest, and I think that I know what it means to have to work for my money. I know what it means to, um, get along with everybody and understand where people are coming from. And I just think that we need more people that are there, not because they want the congressional title or they think it's going to be cool and flashy or whatever it is they're doing. I want to go because I just really want to make a change and I really want to fix whatever's broken and make a difference.
Okay, thank you very much, Dawn. Appreciate your comment. Next is Bernie Reyna. Bernie is a veterinary professional, a Roman Catholic, and a father of five. We will replace the spotlight with Bernie. Hello, Bernie. So give us a 7-minute opening speech, please, on why you would make a great congressman.
Yes, okay. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So my number one reason to stand up and take back Congress is because, like I've mentioned before, 2% of Congress is made up of the working class. The rest are, financial speculators, um, lobbyists, lawyers, lawyers that represent high dollar clients. They're not representing the middle class or the blue collar workers. So it's important for people to take back what's theirs, right? Because right now you have what's being formed in America is we're becoming an aristocracy where only the rich get to write the rules and only the rich get to become richer, and the middle class is a threat to the rich. And you can look at statistics. We are The middle class is dwindling, right? Every decade, there's fewer and fewer people in the middle class. So we need an advocate, someone that's been in the trenches of the working class. And I've been there for 22 years. And, my mom, she worked at manufacturing. And not that many, but as I'm talking to people, knocking on doors, people don't even know what the factory is anymore. They don't know what it is for your parent to be able to sustain. My mom was, I was raised by a single mom, but because that factory, she was making vinyls back in the 80s, and then they transitioned to cassettes and then CDs, and finally the jobs went to China, which you can thank the Republicans for that. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm standing up. I think I just read one statistic where it said that nearly half of all Congress are millionaires. So that's not a reality for the average American. So they're obviously another statistic was that I think there's only one congressman that does not trade stocks. So that trading stocks is a disease in Congress right now. That's just polluting any sort of honesty and um, reason to be there for selfless service, right? So that's the number one thing is we have to realize, well, what's the symptom? We have a disease. What are the symptoms? And we have to diagnose these symptoms and we have to treat them. And the way we treat them is with, honest credit, integrity, You know, when you're, let's say you have a leaky roof, you call a roofer. You don't call a lawyer. You don't call a lobbyist. You don't call the SWAT team. So there's certain aspects where the people that are making this country go, the people that are producing, that are building, that are growing and creating, we're the ones that count. And we're not being, we're the last ones on Washington's mind, right? We're the ones that get the short end of the stick. Um, every time Congress goes there to vote, because they're not there representing the average person, the average family. So that's one of the reasons I'm standing up. I'm just a regular middle class guy, veterinary professional. So I'm doing a lot of the back work. I do some of the front office stuff too. So and accounting and inventory and all that type of stuff. And I've worked for small businesses, medium firms. Currently, I'm working at Texas A&M. So I've kind of upgraded throughout my career, but it's still there's still time where you have to do just the basic stuff to get the thing going. So yeah, so a little bit of my education. Yeah, I do I have background. I started off when I got out of the Army, I used a GI Bill. And I took economics, basic just economics, like a 2-year course to transfer to a 4-year university. So I do have a little bit of economics training. I think that's very important right now, because even a 2-year degree gets you far ahead of most politicians. Most politicians, well, just to give you an example how low the bar is, there's a Republican. I won't mention her name, but there's a Republican that supposedly her qualifications was she was a stripper in Florida. So I mean, the bar's pretty low as far as qualifications go. I'm not a stripper, by the way, but that I mean, you just any sort of basic economics training, it will get you far ahead, because then you start seeing some of these numbers and you start asking critical questions, and you won't necessarily be convinced by the brochure or by the headlines. You're gonna want to look at the ledger. You're gonna want to pencil out the math, and if the math doesn't math, then obviously you have to make it make sense. So it's very important for a future congressman, for all positions of Congress. See, I got a minute 45. So what else can I say? Yeah. So then I went to San Luis Obispo, and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but because I had so many children, I only got as far as what's called an animal science degree from Cal Poly Pomona. Cal Poly Pomona. Cal Polys, they're kind of like Texas A&Ms. Uh, there's more than one. So what else can I talk about? Yeah, that's about it. I mean, I got a minute and 17 seconds left. I think that's good enough for an intro.
Thank you very much, Bernie. I appreciate it very much. For all of you who have joined us, you should see questions in a poll somewhere on your screen. Please, if you would pick 2 questions beginning with F and 2 beginning with S. There's 6 of each, and yeah, and the F ones are for the congressional candidates. The S one will be for our state candidate. So pick your 2, and then we'll choose the most popular ones. All right, thanks. Our next speaker is also running for Congressional District 10, and her name is Caitlin Rourk. Caitlin has lived in Central Texas for more than a decade. She's a mom, and she's a U.S. Army veteran, and also Army Reserve and Texas Army National Guard, I believe. So, Caitlin, please tell us in 7 minutes or less why you'd make a great congresswoman.
Thanks, Mike, for having me, and for everyone for logging in tonight. I know we're getting really close to the primary. I think this may be our last candidate for him, but appreciate being with you this evening. So yeah, my name is Caitlin Rourk. I am also running with Don and Bernie for Congress's 10th, or Texas's 10th congressional district. I'm running because I felt like the moment demanded action. I feel like winning back the House is the way that we restore checks and balances and defend our democracy against abuse of power. Watching the State of the Union the other night, I got pretty excited about what I hope that chamber looks like in January. I was redistricted into CD-10, as some of you may have been. I mean, Travis County and Williamson have just gotten cut up, and I was put into Congressional District 10 from 37, and I really rejected the idea that we can't compete and win in seats like this. I mean, they're hard seats. The numbers are meant to not work for Democrats, but I believe that we have to compete and win in these hard seats. And I think this is the year that we do it. What we've seen over the past week, as far as the primary voting returns, especially Republicans staying home and Democrats showing up, shows that we should definitely be competing. A little bit about me, as Mike mentioned, I'm an Army veteran. Service runs really deep in my family. My parents were public school teachers. I come from a military family. And, I grew up really respecting that kind of service. I grew up in Northern Virginia, a couple miles outside of Washington, D.C., and I grew up believing that Congress and government were these places where people came from all over the country to go and represent the people that they were sent to represent. And that was from whether Washington State or Hawaii or California or Maine. It was supposed to be the best of America. And as I've gotten older, I don't believe that anymore. And I've also worked in Washington. When I graduated from college, I worked doing bipartisan public affairs. I've worked on energy issues, deficit reduction, fiscal reform. And I've also worked in business. I was most recently at Dell Technologies in the corporate affairs department. So I've seen how government works up close. I have seen how that government works in Washington and in the real world. And it is really hard to ignore how badly it is failing the people that it's supposed to serve. And my belief is if Congress stays broken, if we have another 2 years of this and even longer, but especially the next 2 years, so everything else stays broken too. We can't lower healthcare costs. We can't protect our public schools and try to soften some of the policies that we see coming out of Austin from the Abbott administration. We can't defend women's reproductive rights, and we can't build an economy that's going to work for everybody. And we most certainly can't check abuse of power, whether that's the unlawful executive overreach that we're seeing or failures of accountability across this administration. I'm personally interested as a former federal employee and a veteran in, undoing and trying to diagnose what happened with the DOGE cuts from 2025. Right now, politics feels really rigged by special interests and billionaires and super PACs. The leading Republican in our race is proving that point. He's already on TV. He's backed by millions of dollars of dark money. He's posing as this populist. He's very complicit in the MAGA agenda, and he thinks that he can buy this seat and make it his own. And I will fight my butt off to make sure that doesn't happen. He actually led the legal fight. His law firm led the legal fight to redistrict in Texas last year. So he basically drew his own seat and then was the handpicked nominee who has Trump's backing and Abbott's backing and McCall's backing. I think that Bernie alluded to it. It's rotten, and we can't stand for it. CD-10, is a new part of CD-10. It has been gerrymandered time and again. People look at our map. It's 13 counties. It spans from, Lago Vista and Leander through now Austin. They added 92,000 new Travis County voters, extends out through Pflugerville, and then it just juts out. It includes 12 other counties. And obviously, I try to think back to the legacy of the district, who's represented it before. Lyndon Johnson, J.J. Pickle, Lloyd Doggett before he got gerrymandered out and settled in 37. They were leaders who believed that government should work for the people it serves and not for billionaires trying to buy influence. And I believe that our community has a legacy that we can reclaim in this election. I often get asked, what issues are you going to focus on in Congress? And I know we'll go in with some of the questions to our policy stances and also how will you govern? And for me, it's three things. The first and the topic that comes up the most is affordable and accessible healthcare. The second is economic policy that gives people the opportunity to get ahead. I appreciate both of those are broad statements, but I think they encompass the priorities that I hear from people across the district. And the third is just getting Congress back to legislating and doing its job. Being in Congress shouldn't be glamorous or performative. You work for the people who sent you to Washington. And a lot of the time, it's just the nuts and bolts of policymaking. And on that last point, I think it's also building a more transparent and accessible operation in CD-10. Our district, as I said, spans 13 counties. It wasn't drawn to represent shared interests. It was drawn to keep a single party in power. And the way that Congressman McCall has operated, there hasn't been a real need for accountability. He has two offices. They're both in the big population centers. And there's a unfortunate legacy within his office of not being very responsive, and certainly not listening to people who are not big donors or who may not agree with him from a partisan standpoint. I'm a first-time politician. I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I first started this journey, but I felt like running, the stakes were just too high not to. But in the absence of name ID, I've been really proud to earn the endorsements of the Statesman, the Chronicle, the AFL-CIO, Wendy Davis, and a lot of groups here in Austin. The only other endorsing organization in our district that I know of was the Aggie Dems, and I was really proud to earn their endorsement from the Texas A&M group of Democrats. But I really believe this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to flip the seat, and I think we have to do it. I think there's a tremendous amount of urgency. Our team is already on the ground doing that. We have a huge team of volunteers. We're building our ground game, our field strategy. I've been doing the discipline, call time, and fundraising that we need to win this race and even compete against the David versus Goliath race that we're going to face. And we've knocked thousands of doors to date. I was out earlier today. I usually knock for 5-6 hours. And we are ready to take on this fight and win starting day one after the primary. So I'm Caitlin Rourk, really excited to visit with y'all tonight and appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. Really appreciate that. Now we're going to shift to our candidate for State Senate, District 5, Mr. Paul Thomasson. Paul, with his wife Diane, worked for more than 40 years in service to the Methodist Church, in the belief that service to people is service to God. So thank you for joining us, Paul. Apologize for any problems with the link, but tell us in 7 minutes why you want to be a Texas State Senator, please.
Well, first of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Bottom line is that somebody else came to me and asked me to run. I did not actually think this was a good idea. I was talked into it, frankly, for a number of different reasons. I have a great deal of background in immigration ministry. Frankly, I have a family that are teachers. My wife is a retired teacher. My daughter is a teacher. My son is a teacher. My mother was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher. I see children actually being done terribly in two different ways. First of all, I see more and more children being put into cages through the reign of terror that ICE is putting upon this nation. Secondly, most of the children in Texas are actually in public schools, and more money is being taken out of public schools by the administration in Austin. These two things especially are terrible for the children of this state. There are a number of things that I do want to see changed. The minimum wage has not been raised in 17 years, not by 1 penny. The minimum wage is $7.25 now, just as it was in 2009. And I guarantee a dollar doesn't go near as far now as it did in 2009. The summary is that the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. I can't help but feel like somebody has to stand up about this, and especially at this time, I feel that the Constitution itself is in danger. I believe that we should all take an oath to defend and support the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As a result, somebody had to stand up and do something, and that's what I've chosen to do. My background in immigration ministry just touches my heart. What I see happening to the average worker touches my heart. What I see going on in the schools touches my heart. Frankly, what I see going on in our higher schools of higher education, it appears that the party, the Republican Party, is trying to turn them into schools of higher indoctrination. Now, there's all kinds of strange science coming out of Washington, D.C. Strange science is in odd theories about immunology and vaccinations. Well, I believe vaccinations save lives. I believe vaccinations save millions of lives. I see all kinds of other redefinitions I live here at Brazos County, just a few miles from Texas A&M University. And make no mistake, I keep telling the professors over and over again that I will fight for your academic freedoms, because I do honestly believe that they feel like the Republican Party has their foot on the back of their necks in many different places and ways. DEI is not a dirty word. DEI is something that helps make this country a better country. And yet, of course, as you know, that is being fought by the people who control Austin. The Republican Party has controlled Austin for over 30 years. It's about time that things be changed. The motto of my campaign is, it's time for change. And I'd say, really, it's high time for change. And not just me. I came up with that motto when I decided I would run on September 8th. I'm here to tell you that all of America seems to be saying the same thing. It is time for change. It's high time for change. What I did not anticipate was seeing 50%, 57% of Texans in Tarrant County and 57% of Texans in Williamson County starting to say exactly the same thing. It's time for change. Even in Texas, a very red state, the Republican Party is suddenly in real trouble trying to get people to vote for it. Now, I think it's two reasons. Number one, it's the reign of terror put on by ICE. ICE has done the Republican Party no favors at all, even though they created it and thought it was a great idea with their myth that we're suddenly being horribly invaded by all these horrible criminals. Well, I can't tell you how many people I've seen holding up signs saying, "Mi padrinos no son criminales." My loved ones are not criminals. By the way, yes, I am a United Methodist pastor. I've been one for 43 years now. I've been a politician a little less than 6 months. I preach about once a month at a Spanish-speaking United Methodist church. I've been married for over 40 years. I have 2 kids. I've told you about that. But the Republican Party has done a number of things that I think are horrible. In 2017, they passed a law that said that the detention centers are also daycare centers. Now, that to me is hideous. That to me just absolutely sickens me. Saying that they are daycare centers instead of cages for children, that just shivers my timbers. They've also passed laws saying that if a person doesn't have their papers, they should be dragged out like some type of a terrible criminal and put in these cages. Again, that shivers my timbers. Now, if a person's a horrible felon, they should be arrested and sent back to wherever. But that's not what's going on right now. Thousands of wonderful, decent people are being labeled horrible criminals and are being hunted by this secret police force that we call ICE. I believe actually that we need an immigration service, but it has been turned into something horrible. And I think just about everybody seems to agree with me, even a lot of Republicans on that. I could talk about healthcare and how it continues to rise. I could talk about education, and frankly, I could talk a lot more about vouchers. I don't know how many millions of dollars that are being pulled out of our schools this year. 1 billion though, and in 5 years it'll be 5 billion. It looks like to me the state legislature is almost waging war on public education, and yes, we've got to stand up for that too. That's why I'm running. How much time do I have left?
42 seconds.
Well, I'm doing pretty good, aren't I? I guess I'll give you 42 seconds back.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. We appreciate it. Very good statement. And now we'll turn to the questions. As I mentioned, we're going to rotate the speaking order. So that means that Bernie Reyna will get the first question. And on the F questions, we had a tie. So we're going to take those two number one questions. And the first one of those is on a woman's right to choose. Bernie, how will you work to restore a woman's right to choose her own reproductive options?
Well, I am a pro-life candidate. So that being said, I am a moderate pro-life candidate. So that means when it comes to as far as a woman in Texas being able to choose whether Texas is a pro-choice or a pro-life state, so far in our democratic process, it's the state houses, Austin has to be in charge of that, and that's what the Supreme Court has ruled. But as far as on a federal level, what I believe, what I can do as a moderate pro-life person, because whether you're pro-life or you are pro-choice, there's a moderate position and there's an extreme position. So the moderate position is protection for women and doctors in the exam room. So whatever happens there, that's between them. We don't need a politician in there. the concept of universal contraceptions, giving the women the tools to prevent pregnancy before it happens, to make sure they're easy to obtain, confidential, and so I think just having common sense approaches like that would definitely help women in their choices that they have to make. Yeah, protect them. Oh, and also, there's you have Republicans who want to go after doctors and after women who go to other state lines, and I'm definitely against that, and I'll fight against that. I also fight to the states that do have the abortion bill, abortion pill, and telemedicine available to them, that they continue having that. Do they continue to have those tools with them without, because again, there's some extremists on the pro-choice side that want to eliminate that pill, and I'm against that.
Okay, thank you very much, Bernie. And over to you, Caitlin, on a woman's right to choose. How will you work to restore a woman's right to choose her own reproductive options?
Yeah, I unequivocally support a woman's right to safe and legal abortion. As a woman of childbearing age, who I have to share an anecdote from uh, a recent Democratic meeting that I went to. It was a couple that has their first grandchild on the way. The grandchild has a chromosomal abnormality, and their daughter is being first to carry that baby to full term. The baby does not have lungs. And I think it is a travesty what's happening in this state. Our freedoms are being stripped away. We've taken the choice away from women, and it is wrong and it is deeply un-American. I believe that our country was built on the idea that we each decide what's right for our own lives, not politicians, not party leaders, not the government. But we live in a place where that isn't the case. I also acknowledge that Congress has a strong need to step up. I'm hopeful that there will be meaningful change made if we win back the House. We can't undo every state law overnight. I acknowledge that, especially draconian laws like the ones in Texas. But we can protect reproductive freedom nationwide. I would support passing federal legislation that would restore the protections of Roe. So every woman in every state has access to safe and legal abortion care, protecting doctors from prosecution when they provide critical reproductive care, including abortions and emergency procedures. And especially in our district, which is, has a big rural portion, they are really underserved when it comes to clinics and having access to contraception and IVF and emergency reproductive treatment. And so I would work to expand that access.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. And Paul, we're going to turn to you now. A similar question for you. Women's reproductive health. Most Texans oppose a total abortion ban, and more than 80% support exceptions for rape, incest, and the health of the mother. How would you navigate a Republican-controlled legislature to restore these protections?
Politics is sometimes the art of the possible. If I am still in the minority, if I somehow get elected and we don't have enough Democrats to turn it all around, I would do everything I could. I am definitely pro-choice. I'm not a moderate Democrat. I'm not a conservative Democrat. I'm a progressive Democrat. It just absolutely shivers my timbers that a woman's life is threatened when she's forced to bring something to term. It shivers my timbers when I see that a woman has been raped and she's forced to bring it to term. It shivers my timbers when I see that usually a child has been the victim of incest and they're forced to bring it to term. It shivers my timbers for the government to be telling what they should do with their bodies when they don't tell anybody else anything else about what to do with their bodies. This is between a woman and her doctor, not between a woman and her government and the party that seems to want to control them. If I could, I would hope that we would have enough legislatures. I would frankly hope that the House and the Senate would have a majority of Democrats and we would turn this completely around. And of course, we do away with these other things, this witch hunting, looking for people that have sent in pills. And of course, the pills would be available. Of course, we do away with these laws that absolutely hunt for people that have taken themselves outside of the state to get what they needed. I would do everything I could, even to frankly create a state amendment to prevent this kind of thing from ever happening again. But at the same time, we have got to have a majority of Democrats. So I guarantee this is one of the ways that we do differentiate between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans are real big on telling people, women, what to do with their bodies.
10
And the
seconds.
Democrats are real big on saying, we do not want to tell you what to do with your bodies. We are pro-choice, and they are what they call pro-life up until the birth. Then after that, they don't want to do anything to help somebody.
Thank you very much, Paul. Now over to you, Dawn, to wrap up question one on a woman's right to choose. How will you work to restore a woman's right to choose her own reproductive options?
Well, I think this is definitely a federal question. I think the fact that went to the Supreme Court and all courts are there to interpret the law. We need to have Congress actually put it into law. They need to make a ruling on this and say, okay, look, we need to have this in place. Choice is, it's like saying, okay, you're a man and you can't go to the doctor for this particular procedure. And I had a student come in, a college student, and young college student, and she was just in tears. She had found that she was pregnant. She wasn't sure what she was going to do. And so I said, okay, we need to sit down. Let's see what our options are. And so she figured it out. We came up with a solution. But this is, they're quite right. It's a woman's choice. I guarantee you there is not anyone that I know that gets up one day and says, I think I'll just go have an abortion. It's not something that you take lightly. It's not something that is easy to do. And by virtue of having this law in place in Texas, we have doctors now that are hesitating, and that's dangerous because if you hesitate, you're going to put somebody in danger. And plus the fact they're terrified of going to jail or having any kind of a fine. We're losing a lot of our OBGYNs because they're leaving the state. They don't want to practice here anymore, and not just in the rural areas, but everywhere. And so I think this is something that needs to be taken to the Congress and pushed through, and hopefully to the Senate. I don't think we have enough votes to actually get it through the Senate, possibly, unless the Republicans come along with us. There's not enough seats open right now,
10
I don't
seconds.
believe. Thank you. There's not enough seats, I believe, open in order to change it to Democrat. We can only cross our fingers on that.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And now we'll move to question two. And Caitlin, you get the pleasure of being the first one. And this question is on healthcare expansion. Texas remains one of the states with the highest uninsured rates. Do you support a Medicare for all model, or do you believe expanding the Affordable Care Act and pressuring the state to expand Medicaid is more viable? 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think, again, want to just be clear. I think healthcare is a human right. I think one of the reasons that affordable and accessible healthcare is a pillar of my platform is because it's what I hear about from most folks, Republican and Democrat alike, rural and urban alike. I support a continued expansion and certainly a permanent extension of the ACA tax credits. I wish we had more power. The three of us sitting or four of us sitting here, maybe Paul will if he's in office, to influence the very wrong decision to not expand Medicaid in Texas. I'm also supportive of a public option. I love the idea of Medicare for all, but Medicare for all also implies the dismantling of private insurance. I mean, by very nature. And I'll say that I speak to a lot of people in the district who have real misgivings about that. They don't see a path, and obviously the way that we pay for a Medicare for all model just sort of redistributes the costs. But there are a lot of folks that I talk to who have concerns, providers and people who are employed by said healthcare insurance companies. And I think there's a little bit of trepidation. So while I love the idea in practice and I can see being very supportive of it, I think being pragmatic, I look at how do you stop the bleed, so to speak. And for me, it's making sure that people who use the exchange, we can address the insane price hikes that they've seen for their premiums, and also look at ways to make the public option a real option for people. And I think that that's something where we can come to the table and make it happen.
Thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate it very much. Paul, we're going to switch to you. A similar question on healthcare. Affordability of healthcare is a major concern across the state. ACA subsidies have been reduced. There are Medicaid cutbacks. Rural hospitals are closing. Fewer doctors move to Texas. And what would you do to reduce healthcare costs? In 2 minutes.
Well, to begin with, I'd like to cast a vision. I'd like to cast a vision that we take the governor, the Democrats win the lieutenant governor, we take the House, we take the Senate. Now, the Affordable Care Act is being turned into the Unaffordable and We Don't Care Act in Washington more and more. Hospitals, when they close, especially if they're the only hospital in the county, that costs lives. We are the only major nation on the planet that doesn't have nationalized health care. If we really did take the entire Austin, if the Democrats really took Austin, and frankly, the ACA was still being controlled by the Republican Party, and we were still doing all the other things that are self-destructive when it comes to our own healthcare costs, then I would really want to see if we can't have a nationalized healthcare, why not create a statewide healthcare? Something using this huge rainy day fund, doing what we must do to help our own citizens be able to afford their healthcare. Of course, I'd like to see all the Medicare money we can see. Of course, I'd like to see the ACA expanded and made better. Of course, I'd like to do what I could do as a senator, but frankly, if we take all of Austin, if we really can fully control things, we are big enough to be an independent nation in some ways. I'm not ever going to say I'm a big believer in an independent Texas or something like that. I'm not that. But I'm saying we have a huge and strong economy. If we really put our minds to it, we could do something similar to what's being done in California. We could be doing something similar to what's being done in other countries to help their own citizens to reduce the cost of healthcare and to make it available to all.
Thank you very much, Paul. And next, we'll turn to Dawn. Healthcare expansion. As I said, Texas remains one of the states with the highest uninsured rates. Do you support a Medicare for all model, or do you believe expanding the Affordable Care Act and pressuring the state to expand Medicaid is more viable? 2 minutes, Dawn.
I think that we need a single payer. I'm not sure which one would be better at this point. I'd have to look at it a little bit more closely. I think that, and Paul's quite right, we are the only large uh, first world nation that doesn't take care of their people. Healthcare is not a luxury item. This is a right, and we need to start taking care of our folks. And, okay, so we don't have money for it. Well, let's follow the money, shall we? Let's look at the money that's being poured into ICE. That's ridiculous. How about the money that's being sent to Venezuela for $10 billion or excuse me, $40 billion for what? Let's tax the people who haven't paid in to taxes for how long? This whole situation was created because of lobbyists, because of people who want to make more money, because of big pharma. I'm sorry, but I think people should come first, not big pharma, not the people who are running the insurance companies. I get that there could be a place for them in a model that could utilize, but really we need to start putting the money back into people. Okay. And whether that takes a one payer system with regards to certainly expanding Medicaid at the state level, but there are other models out there that we can utilize and look at in other countries. And I think if Germany and other places can do this, we can do this too. We just have to follow the money and put it back where it belongs and not in the pockets of the rich.
Thank you very much, Dawn. And Bernie, turning to you, healthcare expansion. Texas remains one of the states with the highest uninsured rate. Do you support a Medicare for all model, or do you believe expanding the Affordable Care Act and pressuring the state to expand Medicaid is more viable? 2 minutes, please, sir.
Yes, I do support Medicare for all. Um, Simply because we're spending twice as much as our peer nations, right? We're spending, I think it was $4.9 trillion the last time it was counted in 2023 on healthcare. And these corporations that are running the health insurance scams, that's what it is. It's a scam because we need to delist them from the stock market because it's immoral to make dividends off sick and dying people, right? It's counterproductive to what society needs. This is where, make money on something else. Don't make money on sick and dying people. I worked in the medical industry, not just in the animal industry. I've also, one point in my life, I was trying to become a nurse, and I was working in the human industry, and especially the old folks home, and I see how they got treated, and they get abandoned, and it's a pretty sad story. But you know the Affordable Care Act, I mean, they knew when they wrote that it was going to run out and they were going to end up just begging for more money. But we definitely need to control these insurance companies, and we need to expand competition, right? That means interstate competition amongst insurance companies. Get them off the stock market, let them compete like a normal business, and also have a public option, right, as a competitor. And that also goes with clinics and hospitals. We need serious reform. We need to look at what our peer nations are doing that are offering a higher quality of standard of care, which leads to a better quality of life. I think American workers, I think we're worth it, and we're worth the investment. It's our tax money at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Bernie. So now we'll turn to question 3, and Paul will be up first. Paul, the question is on school funding. With Texas currently ranking near the bottom in the nation for per pupil funding, how will you ensure that our public schools are fully funded while specifically opposing the diversion of taxpayer dollars to private school vouchers?
Well, of course, if we do take the Senate, if we take the House, that will be the death of vouchers. I feel very certain of that. There's an awful lot of Republicans across the state that are very unhappy with their tax dollars fleeing and being taken out by the millions, actually sooner, very soon by the billions out of the public schools. So the first thing would be the death of vouchers. Secondly, there are an awful lot of billionaires. As I say, in Texas, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. The oligarchs are doing great. The average man continues to fall further and further behind. Well, I guarantee you that if it were up to me, we'd do an awful lot more taxing of the very ultra wealthy. And we'd put that money where it really needs to be most spent, upon our children. What is more important than the children of this state? I would put it most of all with the kids. And so how would I fund these things? First of all, if I could, I'd do away with vouchers tomorrow, if not today. Secondly, I would increase the taxes upon the oligarchs and bring that money into the public schools. I would want to see teachers' pay raised. I'd want to see all the other things that go with a better education. And I'd like to see Texas rise in its level of educational values as well as abilities and rankings. That's what I would do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Paul. And Dawn, the next question goes to you, and it will be on LGBTQI++. Do you support full equality and protections for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer individuals, couples, and families, including protection from discrimination at work?
Absolutely. These are people we're talking about. I don't understand. I mean, here's the thing. I teach, I have a PhD in anthropology, and I currently am teaching biological anthropology, which has to do with a lot of genetics and a whole bunch of other things. And what I tell my students is biology is very messy. Okay. There isn't just, I mean, this whole idea of being two genders. First of all, gender is different from sex. And I don't know, think people understand that. And second of all, I asked them, I said, usually I'll ask my kids, the students, and I'll say, I look at a guy and I'll say, okay, well, supposing that you do like girls, because you can't make that assumption, I say, why do you like girls? Why aren't you attracted? There's a nice guy looking guy sitting right next to you. Aren't you attracted to him? I mean, wouldn't that be kind of nice to snuggle up with? And they'll look at me, they'll get a little uncomfortable, a little squirmy. and they have no answer because there is no answer. People don't just wake up one day and say, "You know what? I think I'm going to be this." No, they know this from about the age of 3 or 4 on. They understand that they're different and that they want to be something else. And to say that these people don't aren't valued and they don't mean anything, that's wrong. That's just wrong. They're human beings and they deserve to have all of the 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 rights that everybody else have, the pursuit of happiness. And to deny them that, that's just a bunch of small-minded people saying, I'm going to push my values onto you. And I think it's wrong.
Thank you, Don, very much. Bernie, same question for you on LGBTQI++. Do you support full equality and protections for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer individuals, couples, and families, including protection from discrimination at work?
Yes, I think what you're talking about is the Equality Act that almost passed. But I think that I do support lesbians and gays. I think that's the majority of people that I meet on the campaign trail and that work. I work with a lot. I've always worked with a lot of lesbians and gays at my job. There's a lot of them in the medical field, and so I worked with them side by side, and I hear what they want, and I want to go ahead and make sure that I'm going to be one of those guys that votes yes on the Equality Act. I think the only problem would be maybe the transgenders. A lot of people don't like the idea of transgenders using the bathrooms and in sports. So you would have to honestly amend it to take that off. But I do support 100% transgenders work in the workplace. So, if, one day, let's just say, give you a quick scenario, you have a factory and there's one guy that can run that machine, and one day he decides to be a transgender, and the boss is, thinks that's against his religion and fires him. I don't think that's right because from an economic standpoint, he's the only guy that can work the machine. It doesn't matter what he looks like, and not even extend that to the military, as long as it's a non-combat position, because a lot of the times in the military, you're just counting numbers. So it doesn't really matter what you're wearing. If you want to wear the dress or you want to wear a wig, it won't really affect your job counting numbers or programming. So 100% protection for transgenders in the workplace, and passing the Equality Act, but just making sure it's amended to what the constituents want and to what realistically can get passed. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. Appreciate it. And now I'll turn to you, Caitlin. LGBTQI++. Do you support full equality and protections for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer individuals, couples, and families, including protection from discrimination at work? 2 minutes, please.
Probably don't need the 2 minutes, yes, on all fronts. I think we should codify nationwide anti-discrimination protections for LGBTQ plus Americans, and enforce laws that address the systemic inequality that have happened, especially, I mean, here in Texas, but I mean, we're seeing it nationwide. I consider it a civil rights issue. It's interesting, I will say, there are certain issues that come up, and even among Democrats, I've rarely gotten this question, which I thought was interesting, but I've had a few people very privately say, what's your view on this? My cousin is transgender, or my nephew is transgender, and he's visiting Texas in a couple of weeks, and I'm so afraid that he's going to be here, and I just want to know that you're standing with me. And so, while I don't expect this to be a marquee issue, I expect the right to go after us on this issue a lot, because they're going to keep using the culture war issues as these kind of boogeyman issues against Democrats, because they don't have any substantive policies on the issues that Americans are talking about and seem to care about. I also acknowledge that this is a really important question because people who are living individually or with family that are directly impacted by this, they need to know they have not just an ally, but an advocate, and I would be that advocate.
Thank you, Caitlin, very much. Okay, and now we'll switch to question 4. And Dawn, you will be the first person. This question is on voting for congressional candidates. Dawn, what specific federal measures would you prioritize to combat voter suppression, and how would you ensure they pass a divided Congress?
Well, yeah, that's definitely a federal issue. Um, we would need to have new legislation or legislation that would pass that we could go back to um, the voters' rights. Okay. Um, which I don't know why that thing expired. That was so bizarre. But, for 50 years, people had voters' rights, and then all of a sudden, this legislation goes away. But I think what has to happen is there has to be um, the ability to allow people to get to the votes, to get to the voting. I mean, in the polls. For example, right now in Texas, if you are driving people to the polls, you can only drive so many people. And once you do that, you're not supposed to come back. I don't know how they're going to check that. You can't, you have to have, they want to put the SAVE Act in, and if it's thankfully it has not passed the Senate yet. Um, and I think these are things we need to think about because what kind of country are we creating here if we're not allowing people to actually vote for what they want to vote for, actually get to vote? We're going back 80 years, 100 years into where you couldn't even vote. I mean, people actually, 100 years, 150 years ago, 100 years ago, it was easier for people to vote than it is now. And that's wrong. Taking right now we've got the US mail where they're not gonna actually um, postmark anything. So now you've got mail-in votes. What about the people that are overseas or they're in duty and they can't get their votes in and they're not going to be counted because they didn't get there in time. So there's a lot of work to be done and we need to put these things back in place because it's not a country then. We're not voting people in because they're getting the votes. They're getting voted people. They're getting in because only select people are being allowed to vote.
Thank you, Dawn. Appreciate it very much. Next, we'll turn to you, Bernie. Same question on voting. What specific federal measures would you prioritize to combat voter suppression, and how would you ensure they pass a divided Congress?
Well, let's look at the Vote Act. I think is what you're talking about. What it does, it sets up a labyrinth of paperwork for people to have the access to vote. So the system is saying, you're not a qualified voter, even though they are, until you prove it. And I think that's wrong. We need to make sure that the parts of the Save Act, that those abridgments where they abridge certain voters, right? Let's just say you changed your last name. All of a sudden, there's people complaining all over the internet saying, "Hey, I went to vote, same place over and over. It's not working. I didn't change anything." But my husband, he got in right away. So again, there's what's happening is now they're going to say, "Oh well, the computer says you're not registered to vote." Well, that's not good enough. We have to look at countries like Switzerland, which they've had mail-in ballots for since forever, and they're one of the most secure voting nations on earth. So I think adopting some of the Swiss model, where you rely on people saying yes, I'm eligible to vote, and you rely on the offices that have been doing it forever. And this idea of you getting a passport or getting two forms of document. Again, what if someone's disabled? What if they're homeless and they have no documents, right? Their word should be good enough, and they should be able to cast their ballot. And then afterwards, if you suspect fraud, then you um, investigate. But you don't say, oh, there's automatic fraud. You have to prove who you are, because all this is voter disenfranchisement. That's all this is. And so again, we need people who are looking at other models that are
10 seconds.
successful, and implement those models, and not allow Republicans to create this labyrinth of that they're trying to create with the Save Act or with the Vote Act.
Thank you very much, Bernie. I appreciate it. And Caitlin, to you, voting. What specific federal measures would you prioritize to combat voter suppression, and how would you ensure they pass a divided Congress?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We obviously are already looking ahead to the Republicans, and one of the Republicans posted something on social media the other day about how you need an ID to check out a video at Blockbuster. And that was the analogy he used. And one of his former classmates weighed in and said, well, checking a video out at Blockbuster is not a constitutional right as voting is. And civil rights are not optional, but they are being systematically dismantled in this country. They are the foundation of a fair and a just society. But we're seeing too many Americans who are facing barriers, particularly in polling places. And among those, we know that voter suppression disproportionately impacts disenfranchised communities. And, I think that there's, I mean, again, from a boogeyman issue, I think Republicans have taken voting and these rare instances of voter fraud or, literally instances where there's single digit examples as kind of these things that are supposed to distract away from the core issues. And I am really hopeful. I mean, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which has been sitting in Congress, unable to pass, unable to garner the votes, is a really important way to strengthen voting protections and particularly combat a lot of what's happening at the state level. But I mean, when we hear our president talking about nationalizing voting and you're even seeing Republicans starting to weigh in, I feel hopeful that this is an issue where when hopefully, Trump, after hopefully he loses a lot of seats that he was tied to in the midterms, there's going to be a willingness to come and pass some meaningful legislation. And I think the John R. Lewis Act is probably the gold standard of what we need to advance to continue protecting voting access for all Americans, especially Black and Brown communities. And as Dawn alluded to with the SAVE Act, the women who are increasingly the target of these voter suppression forays that the Republicans have taken.
Thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate it. And now we're going to turn to Paul. Paul, your question is on immigration enforcement. What support should state and local government give to immigration enforcement? And how can state and local government hold ICE accountable for their actions and ensure that ICE treats detainees humanely?
Well, first of all, if I could, I'd make sure that the Senate and the House quit saying that a detention center is a daycare center.
Hmm.
Right off the bat, that'd be almost like, for what is more important than that on day one, if we could possibly do that. There's a number of different ways that I could say it. First of all, I do believe that every nation needs to have immigrations and customs enforcement. However, I want to point out that Nazi Germany had immigrations and customs enforcement in the 1800s. It was called something like the Gestapo. But in the last 12 years of the existence of Nazi Germany, the Gestapo became something that was very much a political weapon. And I honestly think that ICE is being politically weaponized. Now, I'm ultimately going to probably be running against Dr. Charles Schwertner. He has created, and he got it passed, a law saying that local law enforcement, instead of doing local law enforcement, must assist ICE in a lot of different ways, and doing what it's supposed to be doing now as opposed to what it used to be doing. I guarantee I'd have that repealed as fast as I could as well. And frankly, when there is a shooting, I'd make sure that the people involved in the shooting are brought to justice. I'm not saying that they will automatically be guilty. I've been on a jury. You examine everything 5 different ways, 10 different ways. You try to do everything you can. You make sure of something beyond a shadow of a doubt. But everybody involved in a fatal shooting should be brought into a system of evaluation and justice, not just given a walk, a pass. That's especially egregious. It is absolutely the most unjust thing imaginable.
10 seconds.
Okay, I'm getting started, and I could keep talking. I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. We're going to move to question 5 now. And Bernie, you get the first question here, and it is on immigration, segueing from Paul's. So how would you, Bernie, how would you reform ICE and CBP?
Yeah, well, the first thing is, from what I'm hearing with voters right now, you have some voters, they want to abolish ICE, and some voters want to heavily regulate ICE. And the voters that want to heavily regulate ICE, they're the majority right now. So with that being said, no questions asked when it comes to the mask must come off, right? You cannot have a secretive federal police force, right? And that also, let's just say that ICE, this is a fact, ICE is the largest federal police force ever assembled, right, in history of the United States. So no masks, body cams on, visible badge numbers, proper vetting, proper training, and we need to end the profit motivation for a lot of these roundups. There's over 30,000 of these beds available. That's, if you do the math, that's, if each bed is filled, that's $6 million a day, over $6 million a day. So that's the profit motive. And you have executives in the administration and in the government that are personally involved in the financing, and they're investors in these for-profit detention camps. So, just like many things in government, it's a total scam. You got to follow the money, open up the ledger, get the brochure, throw the brochure in the trash, open up the ledger, start penciling out the math, and you'll see exactly who's making the money, and you'll see exactly where the money's going. So again, I guarantee you, if you get rid of the for-profit detention centers, all of a sudden, you're going to see all these ICE numbers start going way down. Because why would you need, the world's largest federal police force just grabbing anyone off the streets? And let's also not add that they're operating under a de facto general warrant. And the reason we have a Fourth and Fifth
10
Amendment
seconds.
is to guard against the abuses of a general warrant that the founding fathers were experienced during the colonial era.
Thank you, Bernie. And turning to you, Caitlin, on immigration, how would you reform ICE and CBP?
Yeah, well, I will definitely hold ICE accountable and lead the charge to fix our broken immigration system. I think the debate has kind of died down a little bit about, do you want to abolish ICE? Do you want to defund ICE? I mean, for a couple of weeks, we were getting those questions really directly, and I look at it as, if you really understand the Trump administration's intent, it goes beyond just defunding or abolishing ICE. He will take those law enforcement capabilities and shift them elsewhere within the government. And I was really disturbed by that, especially as a former National Guardsman, because we already have National Guardsmen standing at the border for Operation Lone Star. The Texas Army National Guard has been involved in both federal and state border operations for literally decades. I had real concerns, but I also have heard somebody say, when Dan Patrick has never said that he wants to abolish public schools. He's just systematically defunding them so that they go away effectively. And so, but as far as immigration more holistically goes, I think that Republicans have used it as this boogeyman issue. And I think one of the first things that we need to do when we get to Congress and we have a majority is pass comprehensive immigration reform. We had an okay bill in 2024 that at the time Trump, vetoed, even though he wasn't in power, because that needed to be one of his prime issues for the 2024 election. I think we do need to create a clear earned path to citizenship for law-abiding immigrants who work here and pay taxes and call this country home. And whether, you're a dreamer or a farm worker or anyone in between, I think that needs to be available. And I think we have to reform ICE significantly using congressional oversight to limit raids and enforce humane standards. But I think ultimately we as Democrats need to take back the issue of immigration from Republicans who have hijacked it.
Thank you, Caitlin. And switch to a state issue, actually a national issue with Paul on affordable housing. Paul, state leadership has focused on property tax cuts, but rising rents and insurance premiums are squeezing many Texans. How would you provide real relief to renters and to low-income homeowners? 2 minutes, sir.
I got to admit, I'm not really, that's the first time that question's been asked of me. The only thing I know is the most important thing to me is to frankly raise the minimum wage. I know that if we raise the minimum wage, which hadn't been raised in 17 years, everybody's wages essentially, one way or another, ultimately tied to that. So that'd be the first major step, as far as I'm concerned, to simply see that something that hasn't been raised in 17 years finally starts getting raised, and it needs to be raised dramatically because, frankly, as I understand it, a living wage in the state of Texas right now is $40,000 a year. minimum wage at 40 hours a week gets a person $15,080 a year. So if you even double it, that's still 30,000. You're still not going to make it. So how can you pay your rent? Well, you can't pay your rent. You can't. That's how, especially if your real net income continues to decrease because of inflation. So the first and foremost thing I would know is to simply raise the minimum wage. Now, there's also a lot of different tax cuts, a lot of different things we could do to assist people. Frankly, if a person really is on the margins of society, the Democrat Party really is here to look after everybody, not just the wealthy. We are supposed to stand up for the common man, and especially if they are really having troubles, especially if their family's having troubles, especially if their children involved. So I would advocate other special laws, other special measures that would help them. But the first measure I know that would help them would be addressing the huge disparity of the minimum wage.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul. And Dawn, we're going to go back to immigration with you. How would you reform ICE and CBP?
Sorry, I keep getting this little pop-up on my screen. I think, first of all, President Trump didn't veto the bill because he wasn't in power, but he did convince all of his little cronies not to bring the immigration idea up for a vote. But the thing is that um, we have all of these detention centers, internments, whatever you want to call them, prisons. How much are we paying all these people to run these things? How much are we paying to feed these people and clothe these people? And it's ridiculous that we're spending all this money on this just so he can have saber rattling when we could take that money and actually pay more people for the borders, put more judges in place so they could have their day in court, which, by the way, they're allowed and is written in the Constitution for. It didn't say just citizens, it said all the people, it didn't say just citizens. I wish people would stop calling them illegal. People are not illegal. They're here not without, they don't have a visa. I mean, 50% of the people that are here actually just overstayed their visa, which, by the way, is a misdemeanor, like getting a parking ticket. I think defunding ICE, that's not the issue. The issue is, again, what Paul was bringing up and Caitlin, everyone's been bringing up, is the fact that we don't need that many people. And these people are not being utilized in a fair or reasonable manner. These people are being victimized and brutalized for no other reason but to scare people. And to scare people in blue states and states that have minorities in charge. And so, what's the statement here? The statement is we don't like Democrats, we don't like people who like freedom, and we don't like people who are not white. And I, the whole thing is ridiculous. It needs to be completely overhauled. Oh, shoot. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Dawn. Okay, and we're going to move to question, yeah, I guess it's question 6 now. And I think we can squeeze this one in, and we'll start with Caitlin. And Caitlin, this question is affordability and bringing affordability to the congressional candidates. With inflation and housing costs remaining a top concern for Texans in 2026, what specific federal legislation would you champion to provide immediate relief to middle and low-income families in your district?
Am I off? Okay, I'm off mute. I used that pop-up thing I think Dawn referred to, which was want to make sure it was good. Yeah, I mean, I think affordability is probably going to be the thing that as Democrats we're going to need to drive home because that's where we can lead and we can win and we can actually deliver results for people. So I'll put aside healthcare for a second. The two things that I hear the most often, in addition to just day-to-day cost of living and products that people are buying at the stores and just the perceived cost that is tied to a lot of different factors are housing and childcare. I'm hearing childcare a lot more recently, and I don't know if it's just because vouchers have been in the news or what has prompted people to speak more about childcare. But I think when it comes to housing policy, we have a tough district. We have a large urban and suburban. That's about 2/3 of the district, and then the rest is is rural. And so those, when you talk about housing, those occupy a very different, different meanings when we talk about housing for people. So as far as things that I would do on housing, and I'll say that, a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump came out and said that he doesn't think that people who work very hard should be able to buy a home. We should continue, keeping housing prices high so people have a perceived higher value. But I think it's expanding rental assistance, strengthening tenant protections, building more homes by supporting initiatives like there's the Road to Housing Act, and then the New Democrat Coalition has their own housing agenda that they've outlined that has some bipartisan interest, and helping first-time buyers by advancing targeted tax credits and down payment assistance. I mean, there's tangible policy things we can be doing. I think within, childcare, it's a little bit more challenging. But I think funding affordable childcare for every family, expanding programs like the Child Care and Development Block Grants, the child tax credit alone isn't enough, and we need to expand it. So, I mean, there are durable policy things that we can be doing. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. And let's shift to a state question for Paul now on climate resilience and the energy grid. Texas faces increasingly extreme weather and a surge in energy demand from industries like data centers. How can we modernize the ERCOT grid and protect growth of Texas's solar and wind industries?
Well, by all means, we need to do all that we can to sponsor more energy development in Texas. Frankly, we need to take a look at what we're getting from the data centers, because what we are getting, Republicans and Democrats are almost on the same page on that particular topic. It looks like data centers are going to do these things. They're going to take a huge amount of water. They're going to pollute some of that water, in fact, maybe a lot of it. They're going to lower an awful lot of housing, a lot of land values around them, and they're going to suck a huge amount of energy and raise a lot of people's bills. What are we getting from the data centers? I mean, they're going to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. If you want a future in being a night watchman, data centers might be the thing for you. I don't know. But I'm here to tell you that we are giving data centers incredible tax breaks, which we shouldn't be doing. We should be making them pay better taxes, not lesser taxes. They are not helping us in the least. So let's go ahead with that. Secondly, let us say that we need to do all that we can to develop this great state's ability to use its wind power and its solar power. Now, about the grid, that's a very complicated thing. I cannot pretend to tell you the specifics of the details of how I would fix that. But I do guarantee that we would do all that we could to lower the costs of electricity, first of all, by doing what we can to lessen the impact of these data centers that Republicans and Democrats alike feel like are being forced down our throats. I think that would have a huge impact to start with. And by the way, as long as we're talking about the energy grid and talking about environment, what is a bigger lie and a bigger dangerous lie than the lie that says global warming, that climate change is a hoax? That is a terrible lie. And if there's any lie that is going to kill my grandkids and your grandkids, it'll be that terrible lie.
Thank you very much, Paul. Okay, and Dawn, you are next on the affordability question. With inflation and housing costs remaining a top concern for Texans in 2026, what specific federal legislation would you champion to provide immediate relief to middle and low-income families in your district?
Well, I have to say yeah, it's okay. Sorry, to make sure I was on. I'd have to say the first thing would be yay, tariffs. Okay, they brought those down. Although he doubled down on that. I don't know what the heck he's thinking. Um, Except for he thinks that this is a business and he can run it as such. But the housing issue has been around. We've had this housing issue problem since COVID. I mean, we had a supply and demand issue going on, right? We had a lot of people that could put a lot of money in, and there wasn't anybody to do the work. And now we had less supplies because there wasn't anything coming into the country at the time. But for me, I think what we need to do is think about, um, like Paul was saying, certainly raising the minimum wage. But you have to realize that with housing, it's a lot more complicated. And I think we have to think about not just interest rates and not just all the other things, but the fact of the matter is there's so many people without houses. Right now, people can't get into a house until they're 40 years old. And then Trump says, well, let's give them a 50-year mortgage. Well, I don't think that's really going to work. So yes, we need to bring down interest rates, certainly for first-time home buyers and get them in. But we also have to think about those folks who just can never, ever afford one. And maybe think about, I don't know, Habitat for Humanity is a really good option here. I know that during the Depression, they actually, believe it or not, they built during the dust storm, they built the Dust Bowl, excuse me, they built 300,000 houses and just gave them to people. And it was because there was nowhere to go. They had to leave their farms. And I think that there has to be this option for, oh, sorry, I'm not paying attention. There has to be this option, another option that's going to have to be utilized. It's a very complex problem, and a lot of people don't believe in giving people houses, but I believe if you're going to get them out of the hole, you're going to have to do something.
Thank you very much, Dawn. And Bernie, you get the last answer, sir. And the question again is affordability. With inflation and housing costs remaining a top concern for Texas and Texans in 2026, what specific federal legislation would you champion to provide immediate relief to middle and low-income families in your district? 2 minutes.
The number one thing the United States can do, especially Congress, what we can do is we can restore our public bank. A lot of people don't understand is that our country, when it was developed by the founding fathers, it came along with the public bank. And a lot of our issues that we're dealing with right now is that our our system of capitalism has been completely dominated and hijacked by Wall Street. And Wall Street is, you have to understand, Wall Street isn't just a bunch of rich guys from Manhattan. No, it is a body of international speculators, of international financiers, and they own, and they have what's called vertical integration, right? They own the banks, they own the means of production, they own the storage, they own the logistics, they own the retail, right? So this huge stack is being levied against American consumers and independent American producers. So what the government can do, if we had a bank, right, a public bank, we could finance competition like we used to, like Alexander Hamilton recommended that we do, right? We look at where we're strong and where we're weak, and the government, right, using the taxpayer money, not as a tax, but as an investment, right? We can restart our we can we can start up our public bank once again. And just to give a couple of numbers, since 2008, the banker bailout, we've used over $6 trillion of bailout money, and to go to foreign creditors, right? You don't know where that money's never coming back. If we had a public bank, right, the United States, we could benefit from the dividends that the public bank makes, and we can use it for social programs, to build houses, to build roads, to nationalize our power grid, to pay down our national debt. So yeah, it's a key tool that's not being utilized right now, and we need a advocate for public bank in Congress.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much, Bernie. And thanks to all our candidates. I really appreciate all the effort you put in. I apologize if you had a bad link from me. So people out there, please give a big Indivisible 1431 thanks. Share those emojis, clap hands, and all that. And thanks so much.